their
This
own.
is what I say to that.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Antique Nomad Live. This is the first of what I hope will be a fun new channel. We will be doing more live content, and as things evolve, that will grow into all sorts of directions, I'm sure. Hopefully there will be guest appearances, and I'm going to talk about announcements, and we're going to do some small live sales tonight, so that'll be something to look forward to. Things will change once we get 1,000 subscribers to the Antique Nomad Live. Then we'll be able to go remote, and my hope is to be able to do a lot of things from my storehouse, to be able to go live maybe at a show, or to show you a haul so that you can see things when they're fresh. I also am looking forward to seeing what other opportunities there are with this. Xenomorph is helping me. Very, very thankful to have him here with the controls. This will make this a much smoother experience than if I were trying to do it myself. I do an appraisal fair in Centralia, Washington each year. That'll be August 7th to 8th. That's halfway between Seattle and Portland. I am planning on selling at the Custer's Antique Show, which is supposed to start up again at the beginning of October of this year, but I don't do appraisals there. I think they actually have an appraisal booth there at that show, though. So that's a place that you can come for appraisals.
Anything in Mississippi or Alabama?
I would love to do stuff in those states as well. I haven't yet. There is a show in Fairhope that is supposed to be a good show. As far as appraisal fairs go, I typically am hired on an honorarium basis, meaning they pay me, some organization pays me a fee to make an appearance, and I do antique appraisals. And I've done them for everything from Grange halls to senior centers. And then they charge a fee to help offset the cost or as a fundraiser for their programs. So I could do an appraisal fair just about anywhere, and because I do go towards Mississippi and Alabama, if someone there were to need me to do that sort of work, I would be available for it. So it is entirely possible I could do an appraisal fair anywhere.
When is the next show in Kentucky? And that would be Burlington.
Yes, that's right. This coming weekend. We're hoping it's not going to rain or not rain much. Last year in August, it was beautiful weather, and then at 1 o'clock it rained for 30 minutes and half the people ran off, and then it was beautiful again, and it ended up being a fantastic show. I will be in Burlington this Sunday, and that is a great show. It's a one-day show. It's in a fairgrounds in Boone County, and also while you're there you can hit the Florence Antique Mall, which is having their going out of business sale. I understand they lost their lease because someone's buying the building. It's a problem when you open an antique mall and a strip mall and you don't own the real estate, is you can get priced out, and that's what's happened to them. Since the Antique Nomad, the regular channel tonight, was about appraisals, let's go ahead and play an appraisal game. I'm going to show you a chair here, and let's talk about how much this tattered old chair is worth. What would you think that this chair would sell for if you saw it at a thrift store or a garage sale or some place that is doing an orderly liquidation of things, not holding on to it, just want to get rid of it? What do you think this sort of beaten up old chair would sell for? Let's talk about why things are a different price depending where you sell them, because a lot of you could be right depending on the situation. If you saw that particular beaten up old chair in a garage sale, you might expect to pay between $15 and $25 for it, because it's got to be reupholstered. It probably needs new springs. It might be loose. It might need re-gluing. So it's going to need some help. Now, in an antique store, as is, you might see it for double that price because the dealer bought it figuring they were going to do something with it, and they haven't, and they just want to get rid of it, but they're going to liquidate it at an as-is retail price, and that might be $45 or $50. Then we go up to the next value, which is fair market value. What if you got that fixed and then waited for a buyer and a seller who knew the same thing to come to a conclusion? Well, if it was restored It might be 125 to 225 in the places I sell. If rockers are popular where you sell, they might be worth more. Then what would you do for insurance? If you got it all fixed and you bought it for, let's say, 225 and you put it in your house, well, what if your house caught fire and it burned down? Then what's it worth? Say that it was an insurance situation. Well, the insurance company is going to say, we just want you to go get one wherever you can find one that's nice and suits you and get the claim over with. So they might pay 325 or 350 for it. So which value is right? And that's the big question when you're doing appraisals. Anybody have a notion of what the right value is after all of that? Well, okay, I have to come clean on this one.
Well, we had a couple of people say, let me go back here. We did have someone that thought that it was the Lincoln rocking chair.
Very good. I figured somebody would find me out. And yes, that is the case. This tattered, beaten rocking chair that we have been talking about is actually the chair that Abraham Lincoln was sitting in when he was assassinated at Ford's Theater. Henry Ford paid $2,400 for it back in the 1920s. It's inestimable what the value is because of provenance, and that's something that you can't see just looking at the piece. So it really wasn't fair for me to ask that question, but whoever guessed it was the Lincoln chair, you are correct. And if it were to go to auction, it would no doubt sell for millions and millions, and who knows, because it hasn't been on the market for 100 years. Anyway, that is how appraisals work. They depend on the time, the place, the conditions of the sale. If you say it wasn't Lincoln's chair and your wife says, if you don't clear all that stuff out of the garage, I'm leaving you, well, then the price is probably free. And that's another value. That's called a forced liquidation value. I have to get rid of this now. And sometimes that price is zero. So when we talk about appraisals, there's values and there's values, and the value of the same thing can be different in different circumstances and different places. So there's not just one number. Let's take a look, if we can, at the website. I just started a new website. It's, of course, the antiquenomad.com. And you're welcome to go there anytime, and it talks about some of the general services that I do. Let's take a look at the appraisals, because that's kind of the zone we're in right now. And when I speak of appraisals, here we go. So first of all, I disagree with Dr. Lori when she says that a dealer should not be an appraiser. I agree with her completely that an appraiser should never make an offer to buy on an item that they're appraising. It is an absolute conflict of interest. Dealers can make really good appraisers because we have a lot of experience and we know a lot about a lot of things. It's just that you have to be trained in standards and practices and ethics, and part of that ethical situation is that if you're an appraiser, you're not wearing another hat. I wanted to point to the second paragraph here because I've had a lot of requests and questions from people in the viewer groups asking if I can help them with particular items, single items, and I do have a format to do that now, and I've tried to figure out a way to make it reasonable and useful. The truth is most people who are doing resale can do their own research, but sometimes they're tricky areas. An artist with an illegible signature, something really odd that you haven't seen before where there isn't a ready comparable. And so sometimes there's a moment where you might need that sort of help. Other people, sometimes it's just family curiosity, or they have an item that they're trying to deal with between relatives, that sort of thing.
And he is referring to the accredited appraisals at an affordable price. He said second paragraph. I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thanks. That's great. Yeah, I wasn't clear about that. And so what I'm doing for single item verbal evaluations is starting at a $20 base if you have something that you think is unusual and rare and need the help and just are stumped. It's something I'd be glad to help with if I can. Some things we can do over pictures and over the computer, and some we can't. But let's look at some examples, because I do have a couple of pieces that someone's already sent in to have this done. Let's take a look at the first one, which is this charcoal looking face drawing. It is a modernist piece. It is not actually charcoal. It's actually what we call an aqua tint. And what an aqua tint is if you have a copper plate engraving, for example, you're going to see lots of lines, and that's going to tell you that it is an engraving on a plate. But they wanted to make things that looked a little smoother than that and still could be done in a printing reproduction process. So one of the things they invented was aqua tint. And what that does is the plate presses the image, but then the ink is distributed so it's light on the high parts of the surface of the paper after they press the image in, and then it pools in the bottom part. So it looks like a continuous piece, like a painting or a charcoal drawing, but it is in fact a form of printing. And so this particular piece, the person sent in because they could not make out the signature. I ended up having her open the back of the piece so that we could see if there was more information. We had to actually take the piece out, and it turned out that there was. And the signature is Stanislaw Dawski, who was a Polish artist. And he was very well known in the East and not too well known in the West. So it's unusual that this piece showed up in her Goodwill. She paid $2.99 for it and wanted to list it, but wasn't sure how. So the conclusion we came to is he was alive from 1910 to 1990, and because the Soviets still dominated Eastern Europe at that time, he wasn't as well known in this part of the world, but he's rather well known in Europe. And comparable sales at auctions in Europe are in the $200 range. So she got a nice deal for her $2 investment, I guess $22 because she had us look at it, but now she knows what she's got. So that made me happy that we were able to do that for her. Even though this is a viewer who sent this in, I'm not speaking of names. An appraisal is a private matter. If you're at a fair or a show where it's being recorded, that's one thing, but we don't divulge customer information in the appraisal business. It's part of, again, our ethics and standards. And actually, in certain places in Central Europe, that could go for as much as 400, but we figure in this country more likely 2 to 2.25 because he's not as well known. There's one other one that was sent to me as well, and let's take a look at that. It's also a piece of art. Art and prints do seem to be places where people get hung up easily because there's a lot to know. And this next piece is a Matisse. This was done by Matisse in 1950, which was 4 years before he died. If this was original from that era, it would be a very valuable piece. We can tell, again, some things you can tell online and some things you have to see in person, but I could tell by the type of paper used in this case that this is a poster print. And it would have been done around the 1980s. There was a big resurgence of interest in Matisse in the 1980s, along with modernism in general. And so this piece, which is in good condition and very graphic, even though it's the more recent poster print, should sell in the $75 to $100 range. I wanted to mention when we go to the form that you would fill out to send in for something like this, if your item is not worth more than $20, I'm just going to tell you that. I don't expect people to pay to find out they have a $5 item. That's not the point of this. So let's show a couple of images of some things that were under the $20 threshold that people sent me, but I can tell you a little about them and you'll get the feel for that. The first one here is an image with a clock in the middle. But the thing that the client was asking about was not the clock, but about the silhouettes on the wall, because she had a friend who was downsizing and wanted to know if they had value. Some silhouettes are very valuable, especially the French ones made of cut paper from the 19th century and prior. These are definitely that style, but it really came back. In the 30s, people started collecting those original French silhouettes. Companies started making other forms of silhouettes, and then people started redoing the ones in the paper, much like the French had done. So it ends up being several generations. And because hers are the later generation, the value of those little pieces is likely to be under 20 for all of them. And so that was my assessment of that. The next one shows some cups and saucers here. And the cups and saucers that you see are Limoges, and they are Haviland and Company is the main mark, but the other mark underneath it is another Haviland mark. Haviland was actually an American importer of china from the Limoges section of France. So Haviland is the name we know the best in the United States, but they're not by far the only name in Limoges porcelain. They are the most collected here, though. And this pattern looks from the shape of the cups to be about 1920s. They're very sweet. The values of Limoges are starting to go up again, but they're way down from what they were 30 years ago. So there was a time that these would have valued over $20 for a cup and saucer. Now they're more in the $12 to $14 range typically. This one is a calendar, and this calendar is Russian. And we know that it's 1972, but unless you speak Russian, and thankfully I have some friends who do, you might not know that what this is a schoolgirls calendar. It says calendar for schoolgirls, is all that at the bottom there. And it's got Lenin on it. And people in the West tend to collect things that have Lenin on it. People in Eastern Europe tend to burn and throw away things that have Lenin on it. So a little different reaction in the marketplace. But this particular calendar, because they made a lot of them, is probably in the $15 to $20 retail value. So again, fun things. It's always fun to look, and I'm always happy to tell people about stuff. But there's no reason to have a formal appraisal or a costly appraisal done unless there's value to the piece. And of course, the website page talks about that I am a certified appraiser, so we definitely want to avoid any conflicts of interest. I don't buy the things I look at. When we do these valuations, I should also emphasize that this is a verbal approximation of value. It's me, or I might, I can write you something, but it's me saying, based on my knowledge, based on the first glance at this, here is the direction and value that we're seeing. It is not the same as a real appraisal. A real appraisal has to be in writing. And I have not heard this said by anyone else online, but it's very important to know. A true certified appraisal that you can use for IRS tax purposes or estate probate, it has to define what is the purpose and what value we're looking for. So let me explain what that means. Okay, so this vase, and I picked it on purpose because someone in a recent chat was saying that they were confused about Roseville, what Roseville, old Roseville really looks like. And this is a floral piece from the 1930s. And it's very well marked on the bottom. It says Roseville, I think it's 12V-8. That's the stock number for this piece. It's the snowberry pattern. And Roseville snowberry was definitely a pattern that was very popular in its time. This is in green. It came in several other colors. Now, again, what's the value of this vase? Well, it depends on the circumstances. If I'm doing an appraisal for insurance purposes, this vase, if you had to replace it in a hurry, you might pay as much as $195 for this vase. That is not what it sells for on eBay. That is, I am desperate. There isn't one listed on eBay. I need to go to Replacements Limited and buy it right now. So that is going to that's going to be an insurance value on something like this. For example, you might see it listed at that kind of a price on First Dibs. Now, First Dibs is not a place as an eBay reseller that we go for comps because their prices are very high. But if you're selling to designers and decorators and that clientele, you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to pay up for it. Now, the next level below insurance value is going to be estate or probate value or IRS tax value, and that's called fair market value. And it's very clear. Fair market value has an IRS definition. They are very stuck on it, and that's what you must use. That value is where you have a willing buyer and a willing seller who both know the same things and all the facts are right there. A good example of that is some of the live sales that people are seeing on YouTube where things are going a little higher. Well, it's partly because they are wanting to support a particular YouTube channel. They know what they're buying, they get to see it, they get it described, and so that has extra value to people. So that might be a fair market value, for example. As opposed to eBay, where if you're just a random eBay seller and you just stick something on, well, that might be closer to a retail value. And that's going to be an orderly liquidation, like what would you sell it for if you had it in your shop and you don't want to hold on to it forever, but you do want to sell it and get a decent price. That might be $95 or $100 on that piece. But if you're at an estate sale, you're not going to pay more than 35 or 40. That is an orderly liquidation. They have 3 days to liquidate everything in the house. So this is why one item can have many different values depending on where you are in the market with it. This is why an appraisal is an opinion of value. And that's why, for example, Dr. Lori and I could look at the same item and she might say 120 and I might say 95, and we both can be right because we have different markets. We're looking at different values for different reasons. And that's why it's so important to state what the purpose of the appraisal is so that you know which value you're after. There's differences in markets. The Roseville would do very well where there's craftsman bungalow homes, and it might do well in some modernist settings, and it might sell to an Art Deco collector, but if what you really like is Victoriana, that's not selling for anything. So that's a different number as well. And so that's the reason that there's different opinions, and opinions are formed by research and expertise and also training. Someone asked me a couple of, it was a live. I was on another channel doing a live, and someone asked me if I had ever worked with Dr. Lori, and I said no. And I thought about it afterwards, and the reason that I haven't is because appraisers generally work alone unless we need somebody who's an expert in a particular field. Now, she has a PhD in fine art, and I do not. So if I were to work with her, it would be, for example, to hire her as a subcontractor to help me with fine art that she might understand that I don't. And there's areas of the market that I have more experience than she does, and she might use me if she were doing that type of appraisal. The truth is, a generalist appraiser most of the time does things on their own, and they just get in with a specialist in a certain area if they need expertise in that specialty. My background, I started with, I was on Antiques Roadshow as a backstage guest and saw that they had a lot of junior appraisers at the level I am now, and they were backstage looking things up. It was like the man behind the curtain on The Wizard of Oz, where the item disappears behind the curtain and everyone says, where'd it go? And I followed it back there and I watched them doing preliminary research, and I thought, okay, I can learn how to do that. And they recommended that I go to appraisal school, and I did. And that's when I became a certified appraiser. It's been a great experience. I've gotten to work with Sotheby's and Christie's and some big auction houses, placing items because I was able to identify what they were and help the client get them to the right place. So it's a fun thing to do. It's another aspect of this whole antique and vintage thing that's really fun. One thing, without going too far into it, that's very important if you are ever having a written appraisal done, if you need it for, say, you're settling an estate and they require for some reason that you have an appraisal done, it must conform with uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, which is also something I haven't heard discussed online, and I won't go into all 9 points and the arcane details of it, but it basically means you're certifying that the appraisal is done at arm's length, that you don't have an interest in the parties involved, that the research is done to the proper standard, that the value stated is correct, etc. So that is absolutely necessary because the IRS, for example, if you're making a donation of an item or a group of items over $500, you cannot write it off your taxes anymore unless you have an appraisal done, and it has to be by somebody who is a professional appraiser. It can't just be, oh, I know what this is worth, I made a list. They won't accept that. That's why these things, even though they're kind of arcane, do come into that sort of thing. So real quickly, does anyone have any questions about anything so far, or any comments or anything that you'd like to know more about? And then we'll continue on to other things. How often should insurance appraisals be done? That's a very good question. I would say it depends on the nature of your collection. If the market is changing because of fluctuation like precious metal prices, or if we suddenly have a burst of inflation and the prices all change. So there's no hard and fast rule, but I typically have had clients come back about every 5 to 7 years to update, because mainly because they collect more and they end up with more stuff and they need to make sure that it's listed. It also depends on your insurance, whether you have coverage for everything up to a certain amount, or some policies want anything over a certain age listed separately, and some want everything over a certain value listed separately. So those kind of dictate How long does an appraisal price last? Okay. That's an interesting question. It just depends on the part of the market you're looking at. For example, if I appraise a coin collection, a lot of it is based on the metal value. So if metal values are pretty stable, then those prices may stay stable for a long time. The coin market really didn't budge for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, starting in about 2009, after the economic upheaval, a whole lot of people got interested in coins again. A whole lot of people started hoarding coins and silver, and the prices shot up. So the last several years, you could just about update that appraisal every couple of years on those categories because they kept changing so much. Is appraisal school expensive? Do you have continuing education requirements? It depends on the appraisal school you go to, and I have to admit, I do recommend going to as good a one as you can afford. I went through International Society of Appraisers, and they were very well regarded and are very well regarded. And I feel I got a much better education. It was a certification course through the University of Maryland. It was very intensive. It was like being in finals in college for a several week period. And that was just to get your foot in the door. And then there's levels that you can train for above that. There are organizations that will certify you as an appraiser with a lot less education, and you can do as little as a 2-day course with some of them. And that may be fine if you have a lot of experience, but if you're new to it, I would recommend paying the extra money and doing the more rigorous education. As far as continuing education, some organizations require it and some don't. I always try to stay up to date on Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, which is USPAP or USPAP, because those are the things that we certify in the appraisals. So I try to upgrade that every year. And some of the organizations, ISA does a great job of having conventions where you can go and learn about specialized things, but the original appraisal school that you will take is not about identification. You have to have previous experience. You have to know a lot about your product before you go in, because they're teaching you about how to correctly do an appraisal under different circumstances. Their job is not really to teach you what you're appraising. You have to get that elsewhere. I really think that if you're going to go to appraisal school, it does help if you have about 3 years experience in the field. It's a requirement in some places. Those were some great questions. Thank you. I'm glad that this is interesting enough that it's stimulating some thought. We're going to come back to the website and talk a little bit about that more at the end, because there's some other things I'd like to show you about that. But right now, I wanted to talk just a little bit about why am I doing a live channel. Basically, it just makes sense to have it all in one place. You know, there's certain events where I'm at a show, and it'd be great to show you something as it's happening, and I can't do that right now. I have a storehouse, and I have good reception there, and I can be showing you things for impromptu live sales. I basically want to have an opportunity where, hey, if I'm there and I can come to you live for a little bit, we can have some fun. So it will probably be a pretty spontaneous thing at first. If I'm in the middle of a haul or just some interesting situation, or the other day I was at the Henry Ford Museum, it would have been fun to go live and show you some of that. So I'm excited about this, and I think that it will be cool. Again, when I am able to do this live, I'll be able to do shop my shelves. In this case, what I have is, and you're not going to be able to see it because it's heavy and I have to leave it next to me, but I have, because I'm not in my storehouse, I have shelves behind me with a whole bunch of stuff on it that I think you might find interesting. And so we will just start one at a time. Oh, well, that's very kind. You enjoyed this. I'm glad somebody likes me better than Antiques Roadshow, but I have to say I give them a lot of credit, because I don't know that I would have become an appraiser without their encouragement. So, okay, well, it does not seem like the lovely ladies are going to New Hope, so... I love the sound effects. This is fun.
Does that mean they're getting the hammer?
Well, no, we're not smashing anything.
The Gong Show.
Zeta would like to have a smash or trash sale, but we'll figure that out. The idea when we're in a position to do this in a remote location will be that you'll get to pick what we put up here because you'll be able to see it all. Tonight it's going to have to be one at a time. $5 for number 16. These prices do not include shipping, by the way. This Dutch shoe with the flower on it may be familiar to some of you folks because McCoy is the name of the potter. And it is marked very clearly McCoy on the bottom. There seems to be a lot more interest in McCoy these days. It's actually become more popular than a lot of the formerly big names in pottery. I would say I get more requests for McCoy than I do for Roseville these days, for example, although I did sell a lot of Roseville this weekend at the show. It is a typical McCoy piece in that it has a couple of glaze skips because McCoy was not big on quality in their earlier days. They were big on quantity and making it fast, and that actually has given it a rustic look that is very appealing to people, it seems. And it's got not a whole lot of wear on the bottom, even though these were made in the 40s or 50s. The reason being that a lot of these were made as wall pockets. They would actually have had a hole and sat there, or they just were made to sit on a counter with a succulent or a plant or nursery pins or hat pins or whatever you needed in there. So that is why it does not have a lot of wear compared to their cookie jars and some of those other things that are hard to find in good condition. And very good. Well, that is yours. I thought this would be nice to show because it is something that does not have a mark on the bottom. It was likely made in Austria before 1895, and it is a chamber stick. Everybody had to have a chamber stick in the Victorian period because you had to be able to walk around at night with some sort of light if you had, well, a midnight run to the icebox or to the outhouse. So these were handy, and these were in a lot of houses. This one is fancier than most. All right, I'm going to do a couple more of these, and then I'm going to bring out about 5 items of my show stock because it's an opportunity to share that with you folks who can't get to see me at a show. The first thing, this is going to be something for maybe the modernists while we're on the candle holder situation here. This is by Orifors, and it's a cracked ice pattern. So thank you, that will go to you. This set here is from the 1930s. And what you have is a mustard pot with the original spoon. Very important that they have the original spoon. That's often missing in these sets because the spoons had the lusterware painted on them as well. This is a paperweight, which on its side does not look like much, but when you tip it up, it has a very sweet little Cupid right in the middle. All right, very good. Well, Lynn, thank you. Actually, I think we'll do this next. I mentioned silhouettes, and that silhouettes originated in France. By the 1930s, they were a big deal in the United States, and they mainly looked like this. They were reverse painted on glass rather than cut from paper, and the paper scenes in the back were printed. So you basically have a print, and then the glass has the black parts of the image that, all right, very good. Well, Marina, it must have been meant to be Okay, this will be our last live sale item for the evening. It is a duck, but it's got a really crazy pattern on it, and it is by Dansk. It is part of the Arabesque line, $23, and thank you very much. Appreciate you all indulging me. I know a couple of those sale formats were a little strange, and I'm realizing they'll make a little more sense when we can really do this remotely. I would just like to see some experimentation with live sales and find some different ways to do some things where a lot of people can get a bargain all at the same time and make it easier on everybody. So we'll keep working on that.
We are coming up on 2 hours, and I think we should take a little break.
Just a couple minutes, and we'll be right back. Okay, well, the music has stopped and we're back. I hope you all enjoyed that little intermission. I guess I really did need it, so that was good timing.
Okay, we have one more question.
Okay.
Is George going to be doing this as a regular Wednesday night event?
stay tuned, I guess is the answer. This is a new channel, and this channel will continue to develop with more live content. And live content will be a lot of different things. It could be once I get to 1,000 subscribers, depending on reception and equipment, I hope to be able to bring you things like I do antique shows, and a lot of times I'm so busy that I can't really get out and film very much, but I might be able to do a quick, hey, I'm at the show, I'm set up, we're about to open, here's what it looks like. I hope to also be able to do haul videos live, potentially more live sales, this sort of thing. As far as scheduling, the main channel, the Antique Nomad, is going to continue to be regularly scheduled Mondays and Wednesdays, at 8 p.m. Eastern. I haven't decided exactly how this is going to be scheduled, so please do subscribe, because until and unless we get a regular schedule, the subscription is going to be the only way that you'll know that we're doing something. Because it could be spontaneous and just pop up all of a sudden. But if you're a subscriber, you will be notified. I don't have any way to notify non-subscribers. That's just the way YouTube works. I guess I'd like to talk just a little bit before we go about the antiquenomad.com. And I wanted to just quickly talk about a few of the things that are on there that might be useful to you folks as viewers. We've definitely talked about the appraisals already. Click here to submit your info for appraisal. Maybe we should do that just to show how this works if you're having a single item or a small collection evaluated, because I have had questions about this from viewers in the past. How do I do this? It's really easy. You just put your name, email address, phone number, and there's a very simple form to fill out asking what is the item, its size, any identifying marks, how was it acquired? The reason I ask that is because sometimes people have family stories that give us more of an indication of value or origin, and sometimes they're off a little bit, and it's helpful for me to know so I can make sure you're getting the information that you need to make sure you really understand what you have. Has it been previously appraised is important because, again, values change over time, and appraisals have changed a lot. Before 1983, there were no standards for appraising at all. And to this day, you can just say you're an appraiser. You don't really have to go to school. Now, eventually, your appraisals will be called into question because you won't know how to structure them right, and someone who is a good appraiser and knows those things will skewer you in court if it gets to that point. But anybody, someone who's never seen an antique before can say, yep, I'm an appraiser, and that makes them an appraiser. There is no licensing requirement. There's no government oversight.
There is no college course. There is no master's course. There is no PhD program.
That is also true, yes. You can get degrees that are very helpful in art or design or that sort of thing, but there is no appraisal degree. The only thing that is available is certification through an organization that is devoted to appraisers and appraisal standards and ethics, and they all use USPAP, which is Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. So I wanted to talk about pictures. It's very important to see the top, the bottom, any marks. If it's a piece of art, turning it at a side angle so that you can take a picture across, and this is true no matter what you're doing. If you're sending pictures, if you're putting pictures on eBay, people need that sort of thing to really see what you have. The reason you take a picture across the surface of a painting is so that they can see any crackling or any losses or dirt in the piece. Yeah, it's pretty much as simple as that. And like I said, if you do decide that you want to send something to have appraised, if it's worth under the $20 that I charge to do a single item, I'm not going to charge you. I'll just say it's not worth the money to do it. This just talks about what we do, one item or all. I do sell items on consignment, so that's a pretty basic thing. Most of you folks watching currently would not have a need for this, I hope. But if you ever do, please feel free to contact me. Even if you're somewhere far, far away where I couldn't do it, I'd be glad to try to help advise you. Do not clean for the maid. Do not throw anything away until somebody looks at it with you. The average estate sale, at least a third of the sales are the junk. The miscellaneous things that are low dollar add up to a lot. So don't do that to yourself.
Yeah, we should probably show them the home page, because on the home page that you're going to land on, You are going to see a link to buy George's book if you are interested in that or you don't already have it. And down at the bottom, you're going to see links to all the social media, and you're going to see the mailing list. That's very important. The mailing list will allow George to contact you directly. It's just much easier because we have control over that.
It's so much easier to reach me at the Antique Nomad at gmail.com. Not through the social media is great to watch and have fun with. It's not a good way to reach me because there's just too many different places for me to go find messages and things get lost. And I just hate the idea of not being able to do what somebody needs. So that is the best way to get a hold of me. The blog, one thing if you go to the website is that I am starting to do a monthly blog. This is the first one I did, which was the middle of last month. And it'll be monthly more often if it seems relevant, but I just want to try to talk just a little bit about looking back at some of the events that we do, talk about sales and collecting trends, maybe some fun things that we found or happenings in the community. You know, because I'm both in the online and the real world, it's a chance for me to share some of that experience with you. I'm going to try to keep doing a blog each month and just give a little bit of extra information that you can go to anytime that you like.
The email list, I just want to speak to that again briefly. This is not, we are not going to send you the blog. The blog is something you would seek out on the website. The email list is just for us to have a backup to communicate should we need to. We're not going to spam. We're not going to send regular information, anything like that. It's just so that we have another way to communicate.
Yes. So yes, this is the new website, and that I saw that question too, and this is it. And hopefully that's all pretty straightforward. It also has contact information, and the About page has my professional profile. For me, eBay is just one of several ways I sell. When I first got in the business, they said if you wanted to do this full time and make a living, you needed to have 5 different income streams. And so for me, I've got YouTube appraisals, estate sales, I've got eBay sales, and I've got shows. Thank you. There we go. And so between all of those, you can make a good living as a professional dealer. And the reason they said to have multiples is when some things go up, other things go down.
Jay Goodwin, I would say dust. Vacuums.
Vacuums. Yes, he does collect vacuums.
Is that a collection? Is like
when you have 6 of them, it is.
Oh, okay. 1, 2, 3, only 4 vacuums.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, early 90s, when the thrift stores were full of 70s, like big pimp daddy coats and, you know, that kind of stuff, it was cheap and very easy to find for practically nothing. I loaded up on those.
Yes.
Polyester shirts, 70s, you know. I'm from the 70s, so I'm one of the few people who like the 70s.
Actually, a lot of people like the 70s now. Again, it's that generation. Nostalgia has a lot to do with what you had or what your parents or especially grandparents had. It seems like it skips generations. So a lot of people are into the 70s now in a way that they were not. Again,
so hold on. Stop the press. I just want to say we have officially arrived. We got our first thumbs down.
Aw. That's wonderful.
So
that's fine. To each their
This
own.
is what I say to that.
Well, that sounded like a thumbs down too. Yes, I'm liking the sound effects. Yeah, I have to admit I'm one of those people who. Good press, bad press, it's all press. I don't really lose a lot of sleep over thumbs down or negative comments. In fact, actually, negative comments I really try to address because sometimes you know, people are really trying to express something meaningful to them, and I want to try to understand what they're saying. I had someone recently say, um, "Gosh, you're just so all over the place. You don't really focus on design so much," and there's some truth to that. I realize everybody doesn't want a big long dissertation about designers necessarily, but um, good design is a lot of what brings people to be interested in certain things. So I took that to heart, and I actually tried to talk a little more about design in an upcoming video. So, you know, we really do try to listen as best we can.
Who else wants to see Zeno in a Pimp Daddy coat? Well, those Pimp Daddy coats are long gone. That's all I can say.
I have one that'll fit him. We'll do
Oh,
it.
do you? Okay,
I
well.
do.
Do you have the rest of the outfit? Anyway.
No, I really only did the jackets, but I love the jackets. They're so big and boxy, and yeah, I think they're great. So.
I had those like, well, see, I came at, there was a place in town where I grew up, and it was a big warehouse, and it had new old stock 70s jean bell bottoms, and they were all for really tall people who were really skinny. And at the time, that described me. And so I got a bunch of those. And those were fun for a while. And some of the, I don't know what you call those things, those zip up little booty, things like leather side zip, those were everywhere. So, you kind of put a pair of those and polyester shirt and put a feather in your hat, you're ready to go. I had some big platform shoes too.
Yeah.
I don't think they were old though. I think they were old style, but I don't know. I got them in the Haight Ashbury, so I don't think they were.
Platforms were always funny
old.
to me. I mean, when you're already 6 foot something and then you add 3 extra inches, it's a you definitely tower.
I don't need any more height.
Yeah.
So
me either. I'd bash my head on enough rafters in basements at estate sales in my lifetime to.
But sorry to cut you off, but we really do have to wind down because we have an estate sale to hit in the morning and a long day ahead of us. So
yeah, that's true. I've got some eBay to get out, and I just thank you all so much. This has been a lot of fun. I'm glad that this was worthwhile to you. I hope we got to involve you some and answer some of your questions and comments. And it was just a lot of fun putting this on. We learned some stuff. This will get better as it goes on, I'm sure. And just very excited to have another venue to talk to all of you and to talk to you in a more spontaneous and open forum like this. So thank you all very, very much for being with us. And I am George the Antique Nomad, as you know, and I look forward to seeing you again here on the Antique Nomad Live. Please do subscribe so that you can be notified for when we're going to do more content, because it'll be coming very soon. If you're in the Burlington, Kentucky area, I will be there at the show this weekend on Sunday, and maybe I'll get to see you there. So I guess until then, we'll just sign off for now. Bye for now, and thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to doing this again with you more. Thank you all again.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.